Well, hello there again. And whatever you're having during this time of watching or listening to this podcast, I'm raising a glass of good cold water because it's kind of a warm day outside. Might take a few sips as we go along. I'm Valerie Sokolosky. The show is Doing It Right. And you know the drill. I only interview highly successful people who are, in fact, doing it right. So stay tuned.
Welcome to our podcast, Doing It Right. This podcast reveals authentic stories from successful leaders doing it right. It's about their journey to become a leader, their choices, motivations, and lessons. In essence, how they built successful personal brands. Your host is Valerie Sokolosky, author of 8 leadership books and nationally known as an authority on executive presence and personal branding. Let's get started. Here's Valerie.
So I want to introduce the person you're seeing on the screen, and you'll hear in just a moment, Mark Whitaker. He is a very well-known whistleblower. Let me just tell you a little bit. Mark Whitaker is an Ivy League Ph.D. and was in the 90s, the highest ranked executive of any Fortune 500 company to become a whistleblower in U.S. history. Welcome, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, Mark, that was in the 90s. We are now way past that. And your story is still being talked about. There is a movie on it called The Informant. And what I want to say in starting out, Mark, is that you're really one of a kind person who has an insight into the underground and underlying greed that can go in behind the doors of major corporations. And here you were, this young whippersnapper, PhD, scientist, and you had an opportunity to go to work for ADM. And the story goes that you rose to the ranks really quickly. I'm almost picturing you walking in the door, and this is in my mind after watching the movie and, of course, watching you in person. I have even in my mind almost being pulled up by the strings and said, here, we're just going to make you a C-suite person. Tell us what happened on those early days at ADM.
Yeah, when I started there, I was 32 years old, basically 7 years from getting my PhD in biochemistry from Cornell. I was divisional president of the biotech division, the fastest growing division of the company. I was corporate vice president of the whole company, and I was ranked number 4 out of 32,000 employees. It was 70 billion in annual revenue. We had a 75-year-old CEO, a 69-year-old president, and I was 32. 4th ranked executive in the company. So it was interesting times, and I kind of got caught up in that, to be one of the youngest leaders on the 56th largest company on the Fortune 500.
Mark, well, first of all, congratulations. That says everything about your brilliance, and you're still using your brilliance. We'll talk about that in a moment. What was Ginger, your wife? You've been married now how many years from meeting in the 7th or 8th grade? How many years?
Yeah, we did. We met 7th and 8th grade. We've been married 44 years. Now we would have been married about 12 years by that point.
Well, by that point, thank you for that. I wanted to bring it up early because this is a huge story about an executive who ended up in jail for embezzlement. And Ginger, your wonderful wife, stayed with you, Corky. I think that's what she calls you.
Well, that was my name. My mom named me at 6 months of age. And that was my nickname within my family because I was always kind of happy and energetic compared to my siblings. So she thought I was a corker, and she nicknamed me Corky, just in our family.
And you still are, and you still are. And Ginger has stayed with you through your rise and your fall of being in jail for 8 years. So let's just start. So you were sentenced at ADM at that young age to 9 years in federal prison for embezzling $9 million. Is that right?
That's correct. But it was, Ginger really started the price fixing case. It was the largest price fixing case in U.S. history that was started by Ginger. She's the one that forced me to turn myself in. The FBI even said the case would never happen if it wasn't for Ginger Whitacre. So she really started the case. And then we had under table bonus for being part of this international cartel. We received under the table bonus system. We did. And basically they only brought that up, ADM did, when they learned that I was the informant. When they learned I was testifying against them, they said, look, Mark put us in flames, let's put him in flames. So it was embezzlement from a shareholder standpoint, but it was something approved by the management in the company. It was kind of an under the table bonus system when you're part of this cartel.
Wow. Mark, how did it all start? In other words, here you are, you're in your 30s, you're being given this wonderful opportunity. It goes from that to an FBI investigation, and you are the key person. So just go back to that point and fill us in the blanks of how that started.
Yeah, basically we were having problems in one of our plant, and the CEO brought, thinking the competition was maybe contaminating one of our plants. So he brought the FBI in, and I was sharing Ginger because I was about, once I was 2 years with the company, the CEO and the president then brought me into a price fixing scheme that was going on. They felt like I was family. And keep in mind, by 2 years with the company, the CEO was now 77 and the president was now 71. It's 2 years later and I would have been 34. Whoa. And that's when they said, look, we got to start preparing some of these younger guys to take over the leadership of the company. That's when they started integrating me into the price fixing. So at the same time that we were having problems with this plant, I was sharing with Ginger. It was November 5th, 1992. I'm about 7 months being mentored in the price fixing scheme. And I was telling Ginger, it's interesting that the FBI is helping us on one case, a smaller case, but there's this huge price fixing case going on right under their noses. And that's when she started asking me lots of questions.
Now, I have to say, that's a great introduction to Ginger, who has a book out, by the way. Do you have the name of the book in case people want to read it?
Well, there was a book we hired a ghostwriter titled Mark Whitaker Against All Odds. It came out in 2009. Okay. It was a book that we hired a ghostwriter to write our story that included the faith journey. It came out the same time the movie, because the movie didn't have anything about the last 30 years, our faith journey, so the book does. Mark Whitaker Against All Odds.
And Mark, would you be kind enough to send a signed copy to me?
I would.
Okay. I'm sorry we don't have the copy
after the show.
All right. So let's go back. So there you are, and you are finding out. Well, the FBI is already involved. And by the way,
helping us, not as ADM as a
right.
ADM looking at ADM as a victim at this point.
Right. Okay. And please tell the audience that may not know what the product was.
Yeah, well, it ended up being multiple products on the price fixing, multiple. But the first product at this point was lysine. It was $1 billion market, a product. ADM's the largest food additive and feed additive company in the world. A $70 billion company with 32,000 employees. And this particular product went into poultry feed like Tyson Foods, Purdue Farms, one of the ingredients that went into the poultry feed. But most of the ingredients at ADM went into the food system like Kellogg's, Pillsbury, iced teas, orange juices, and they were charged on several of those products too. They ended up getting charged on multiple products for price fixing, but lysine was the first.
Isn't that something? That affected us as consumers. So there you are.
Every consumer.
This is so fascinating, Mark. So the FBI, you end up being, even though you are being paid $1 gazillion, tell us about that before we get to how you ended up wearing a wire for 3 years for the FBI. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. Well, basically when I told, and I was paid, I mean, it was I was with the company 7.5 years and was being paid 7 figures with the bonuses and stock options and base salary, and I bought the CEO's home, and I had my own jet, a Falcon 50, and basically I was Justin Bieber before Justin Bieber, and I
And
really
how
got caught up in that life.
and how
And
many
then I was
car
a Christian.
how many
What's that?
cars did you have, Mark?
I had an 8-car garage. The CEO's house that I bought had an 8-car garage, and I had 8 cars in that 8-car garage.
Now, stop for just a minute there. Here's Ginger, a wonderful, from what I understand, rather calm woman and faith-based woman.
Yeah, she was a Christian a few years before that. I was not at that time, but she was praying for me. But she was a Christian at that time when this case started.
So as a wife of many years, I'm just picturing, I think my gut would be hurting a little bit. I think I would be questioning a lot, like, well, Mark, we've just been married, and you're bringing all these 8 cars in to the driveway one at a time. I mean, what was Ginger saying to you?
Well, she had a 10-year-old Grand Cherokee, and I remember getting a red Ferrari, and I said, Ginger, let me buy you a yellow one. And she said she wanted to be a good steward for God. And she had 10 years on her car, and she felt like she had a few more years yet to go. And I couldn't even understand that. It was like hearing Latin, because we had a horse riding stables with an inside arena, 3 golf greens on the property. I mean, our CEO was a billionaire, and I bought his home. He sold me his home the first month when I became divisional president of the company.
So just think about this, audience. Really, if you were that age and you were being given this opportunity in this huge company with lots of perks way and beyond, would you hold on to your true north? And I just want you to think about it, because I've not been there, but a lot of people have, and Mark's one of them. So Mark, tell us a little bit about how you then switched over from enjoying all of this lifestyle, and now you are getting ready to be a whistleblower for the FBI.
Well, it's November 5th, 1992. I'm 7 months being mentored on the price fixing. I'm about 2 years with the company, and that's when the company saw me as like family, so they brought me into and by the way, it was proven in court that the price fixing was going on 12 years before I even joined the company. And then I share it with Ginger, what was going on, and she said, Mark, I can't believe that. That sounds like a fraud. So she asked me more questions, and she said, how much does the company earn? I said, the company makes hundreds of millions of dollars in this price fixing scheme, sometimes $1 billion a year. She asked me how long it's been going on. I said, 12 years. She said, how long, Mark, have you been involved? I said, well, they told me about it. Now that I'm part of the family, for about 7 months, I've been engaged in being mentored to take over this price fixing scheme at some day when I get a couple of years experience. And that's when she said, Mark, who pays for this? And I said, basically every consumer that goes to the grocery store pays for this price fixing of these food additives. And she said, you mean my grandma on Social Security, my mom and dad that work at factories, both of them were factory workers, one at Procter & Gamble, the other at Ford. And she said, Mark, I can't believe we're doing this. And we live in a mansion with an 8-car garage and flying around on a Falcon 50. And I said, Ginger, if I'm going to move up, I'm going to have to do this. They've been doing it for 12 years. There's only 3 leaders above me, and they're all 3 involved. So if I'm going to move up, I have to do this. And she said, boy, Mark, I'd rather have a 2,000 square foot house, 2 Fords in the driveway, and have my husband back. This is terrible what's happening. And then she went and prayed about it. And I tell you, Valerie, when she went and prayed about it, I knew I was in trouble because nothing had ever turned out good for me when Ginger went and prayed about it at that point in my life. And she went and prayed about it, and she came back and she said, Mark, you've got to turn yourself into authorities. And if you don't, I'm going to do it. We're going to do it today.
Whoa.
And it happened that day. And in the court trial, 7-week trial, the prosecutor said that over 100 people knew about it for almost 12 years. And Ginger Whitacre exposed the case the first day that she heard about it.
Mark, what in the world gave you the courage to allow her to do that?
Oh, we argued a lot, but I've known her since she was seventh grade and I was in eighth grade, and I wasn't going to change her mind. And it was probably the biggest argument we've ever had in her life on November 5th, 92, which is 32 years ago. But she wasn't going to budge. She saw it was a fraud. She didn't want to live in a house where fraudulent activity was happening. Biggest price fixing case in history. That's a fraud. It's $1 billion crime a year that's been going on for 12 years. And she said she'd rather be homeless than live in a home where illegal activity was occurring.
Mark, you could have left her. You could have said, "Sorry, honey, that you feel that way. Stay with me. I'm still going to do it." You had 3 children, is that right?
That's right, 3 young children.
And what ages were they at the time?
Well, the youngest was 6. He's 38 today. The other 2 are just a few years older. We tried for 8 years to have our own children. We adopted a 5-year-old and 7-year-old, and Ginger was pregnant 3 weeks later. So we had 3 children in 1 year: a 5-year-old, 7-year-old, and a newborn.
Oh,
so the other 2 were just a little bit older than the 6-year-old. They were 12 and 13.
And that happens. We've heard stories about that happening.
Yeah, it did. It did for us.
So
For sure.
she takes you by the hand, I guess, and says, "No, we're going to turn you in." Did she realize at the time what that meant in terms of jail sentence for her wonderful, loving husband who stayed together through all of this? Do you think she realized the impact of it, Mark?
I told her then, I said, "Ginger, I could go to prison for this. This is breaking antitrust laws. This is fraud." And she said, "Mark, if you go to prison, I'll stay with you." And then I said, "Ginger, our CEO's a billionaire. He's best friends with President Clinton. He's on the phone 2 or 3 times a month with President Clinton." I said, "This is a company that will destroy us, the 56th largest company on the Fortune 500. And she said, "No, I prayed about that. God will protect us. We're going to turn yourself in, and you're going to do it today." And we argued about this for a couple hours, and there was no change in her mind. And I tell you, I knew too that she was doing the right thing, because we were a successful company without that overreaching. But I tell you, when greed is your priority, it's never enough.
That's one of your top takeaways. And I'll just read what you said. Top takeaway: chase the right things. Chase the right things. And on that note, so you knew that you weren't chasing the right things, and she did too. Take us now to the FBI and what that was like. And before I ask ask you to respond completely on that, I watched, as many people have watched, the movie The Informant with Matt Damon. And I have to tell you, Mark, that was a silly movie. I mean, how true to facts would you say that movie was? And did you know that it was being made, The Informant?
The movie, well, they bought the rights for the movie from New York Times, from their book that came out my first month in prison. So I wasn't a Christian. I became a Christian in prison. But my first month in prison, the first book out of 3 books came out, one called The Informant. And that's who they bought the rights from. It was a very serious book. It's like the movie The Firm, the book is, the Tom Cruise, John Grissom story. But the director kind of made it a little bit more comical. He took a serious story and turned it into more of a comical. And the FBI was so upset about that, they did a documentary on Discovery Channel to combat the movie. And that's on my website, markwhitaker.com, Investigation Discovery by Discovery Channel, right under the picture of Ginger and I on the homepage of www.markwhitaker.com. People watch that documentary with the 3 real FBI agents and Ginger and I, and people say, this is 2 different stories. We could not relate to the story. And if someone watches the documentary, they will see it's a whole different story than the Hollywood version.
Well, I am surely glad to hear that, because I was thinking, this is not the Mark Whitaker that I saw on stage, thus got to know, and you were kind enough to be on the show. So, Mark, stay after just a moment and be sure that our producer gets all that information so it'll be under our banner in this show.
Yeah.
Now,
so the FBI was so upset, and that's why they did the documentary. And they also, the movie made it look like they're mad at me. So they had the 3 agents lined up, one right after another, in this documentary saying, we told Mark if he got caught, he would get killed. And we told him that a couple, 2 or 3 times a month. And the movie kind of missed all that. And it
Yes.
missed the suicide attempt and they filmed that, but they felt like it didn't fit a comedy. They showed that in the documentary. So the documentary is a whole different story than the Hollywood version of the movie.
All right. Well, that's good because you were portrayed almost silly in that. So talk about with me the wearing a wire. The FBI and you were talking, you've agreed to be the informant and bring this ADM company down. Wow. What was it like to wear this wire for 3 years, and how in the world did they not know it?
I tell you, wearing a wire, Valerie, was the most stress that I've ever went through my life. Especially, like you said, when you see the documentary, when the FBI say, Mark, if these guys catch you, they're going to kill you.
Yeah.
And to hear that 2 or 3 times a month for 3 years took a tremendous toll. Tremendous toll. Prison was a cakewalk compared to wearing a wire for 3 years against some of the most powerful men, including billionaires in the world.
Mark, how did you handle that stress? In the movie, it said that you have bipolar. It didn't talk about how you handled the stress. Can you give us some personal insights into all that?
Yeah, and that's where it'd be good your audience to see the documentary. It shows that I was blowing the driveway off with gas leaf blowers during thunderstorms at 3 a.m, that I couldn't sleep at night. I lost 60 pounds. People at work thought I had cancer. They're actually saying, as I'm wired up, Mark, you need to see a doctor. We're convinced you have cancer. And it was that I was just falling apart and couldn't sleep when I thought, what's going to happen if they catch me wearing a wire, or what's going to happen when we're in federal court someday and they know I'm a witness against them.
And that is currently in our life and in companies happening.
Yes.
Mark.
And then the FBI gave me a 6-month plea deal, a deal of a lifetime.
And why didn't you take it?
Me to sign I'm sorry?
Why didn't you take it?
I tell you, when Ginger said, Mark, I want you to sign this plea deal, it was a deal of a lifetime. And the documentary shows how much the FBI supported me, how they felt so bad that I did not sign that plea deal. But when Ginger asked me to sign, I said, Ginger, it's all your fault I'm in this mess. I've had to wear a wire for 3 years because of you, Ginger, and I'm going to do the opposite you want me to do. I ripped it up, fired the lawyer who recommended it, and ended up at 3 years in the courts and 8.5 years prison instead.
I am so sorry. I really, really am so sorry that had to happen. And because it happened, was there an aha moment or a significant event during your prison time that you'd want to share?
There was. In the long run, and Ginger was very upset at that time too, to the point where she said murder was an option even though divorce wasn't. And I mean, it's one of the most mad she's ever been at that time. But I tell you, I was so broken, I attempted suicide, and they show that in the documentary. They filmed it in the movie, but with being a comedy, they didn't show the suicide attempt, but they show it in the documentary. I was so depressed, tried to take my own life, and it's amazing. A couple of gentlemen reached out, and one of them being Chuck Colson. And Chuck Colson poured into me, and I had 8 years of college, including a Cornell Ph.D. in biochemistry, tell me there is no God, in the sciences, Big Bang Theory and Darwinism. And Chuck Colson, being an intellectual, showed me some of the best scientists in the world that believe in God. He became like a father to me, and I became a Christian my first year in prison, and it changed my life. It changed my life forever. That was 26 years ago. I was 40 years of age.
My goodness. That's a long time that God waited to knock on your door, but thank goodness he did. What are you doing now with your life?
Yeah, right now I'm Vice President of Culture and Care of Coca-Cola Consolidated, the largest bottler in America, publicly traded on the NASDAQ. And they were one of the victims in the case for the corn syrup that goes in a beverage. So I am literally Vice President of a company that, reporting to the chairman's department, that was a victim of this case 32 years ago.
Isn't
culture
that
and care is really integrating faith in our company. We're a faith-based, purpose-driven company. We have a chaplain in every plant site, 104 plants. We have a purpose statement to honor God in all we do by serving others, pursuing excellence, and growing properly. It's all about doing it right and doing it God's way. And it's amazing how it's transformed our company. And I lead that. And to think about who I was in my 30s, boy, how God gave me another chance, but this time to do it God's way and not my way.
what a story. What a story. And now as a leader, you have said to me, if you're not a servant leader, you're a selfish leader.
I feel strongly of that. And I've lived both, being part of that price fixing scheme and those under the table bonuses and all about me and ACAR. That's selfish leadership. The ones I worked for, they even had bigger homes and even more cars than that. I mean, we were selfish leaders focused on ourselves when I was in my early 30s. And show me your mentor, I'll show your future. I had the wrong mentor. And then Chuck Colson pours into me, starting at age 40 in 1998. Show me your mentor, I'll show your future. My future changed. I got to know God. I became a believer. I saw how important it is to do it right and do it God's way. And it has changed my life the last 3 decades.
And now you're sharing your life and your testimony all over the country on behalf of the company you're working with, which is just amazing. It's just amazing. What happened to even, I know there's a documentary, but for this show, what happened to all of the people at ADM? I can imagine how they looked at you when they...
Oh, they were so mad, and even more mad at Ginger for forcing me to turn myself in. They for sure wanted me dead.
Absolutely.
Almost 30 people went to prison, 4 from ADM, and many went to prison for many years. And the stock went from 30 to 3 and had just a huge impact. It just had a huge impact on the entire industry, because 40 price fixing cases have come about, been exposed since then. So it made other whistleblowers come forward, and there have been 40 cases since then.
Well, the good news, Mark, is that you're still alive.
Yeah.
Seriously.
A miracle.
Did you have Secret Service or someone
they
that...
did talk to us about like witness protection.
Right.
They did. And we really did not want witness protection, because you can never see your parents again, your siblings again, your other family members. It'd just be Ginger and I and our 3 children. So we decided, they were so much older than me, the other executives, kind of 30 to 40 years. Almost all of them have passed at this point. We decided not to go Secret Service. As Ginger said, God would protect us, and God has protected us. Most of them have passed since then. And yeah, it's been a wonderful life, a life of significance, to make a difference. And we're averaging 113 recommits and salvations per month of our employees with our chaplaincy program and our Bible studies and prayer groups. Our retention rates are high. It has transformed our company. And then everybody's got the purpose of, let's do it right. Let's do it God's way.
I love that. I love that, Mark. In all the interviews you've had, is there a question no one has ever asked you and you wish they had?
I would say the question that I don't get very often is this: Mark, you did 3 years wearing a wire, 8.5 years in federal prison. Was it worth it? Would you rather just walked away and worked somewhere else and not got involved with either side? I think if I would have walked away, and I thought about that often, if I would have walked away, and that's the logical thing to do, I think I needed to be broken. I think I needed to get into myself, and not only becoming a Christian in 1998 saved my soul, it changed how I worked for the last 26 years, more of a servant leader. And it also, I think, saved my family. I think if I would have became COO at ADM, which was planned and even published in Fortune magazine as part of the succession planning in the early 90s, I think I would have lost my family, would have not become a Christian. And I think brokenness, it's the best thing in the world that ever happened, even as painful as it was. And my wife Ginger would say the same thing. We're married 45 years next month in June. And to survive that, only God. And not only did we survive, we thrived as a family. Even the companies that were the victims gave Ginger a whistleblower reward, including Coca-Cola in Atlanta and Tyson Foods. They all got together. ADM paid hundreds of millions of dollars back, $400 million just for corn syrup price fixing. And they gave Ginger a whistleblower reward to support her while I was in prison. The ones I stole from took care of my family for 8.5 years. And I worked for a company that was a victim. Only God could do that.
What else can we say? That is doing it right. And God always does if you let him. Mark, what a privilege. The audience can see in my show notes and also in the banner your information should they want to get in touch with you and your website. And I am just more than thrilled that you came on this show. It was a huge story in the 90s. It was a big movie. You're still out there telling the journey and making truly exactly what you said, significance in this world, because unfortunately of what you went through. But here's the good deal. You rose from the ashes. And that's, those of us who have faith, that's the promise that God makes, isn't it, Mark? So
something
thank
only
you.
God can do.
Yeah.
Only God can do.
Right. And by the way, I want to talk to you for a minute after the show about something. So stay tuned, can you, for just a minute after? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So I always, Mark, end with what I call a Valerie'ism. And with this significant episode that you so kindly took the time to be on, I decided my Valerie'ism for today, little philosophy, is when it's not right, take a turn. Not only is this whole show about that, but also, audience, think about those times, me included, when we go down a path, and especially in today's world, it's so easy to just shave a little. And how many times have we heard, well, it was just a little white lie. And that's all it's needed. A little white lie opens a crack, and that crack can get bigger with the next little white lie. And then it becomes, unfortunately, can become a habit. So just from Mark's standpoint, I know, and mine too, don't go there. When it's not right, it's not right. And that's why I love the name of my show, Doing It Right. Period. Exclamation mark. And audience, if you've enjoyed this episode, you know what I'm going to say. Hit that red button, subscribe to these episodes. You don't have to see them every time or listen every time, but you'll get reminders. And you'll miss something if you miss something like Mark's story today. So don't miss it. And again, Mark, thank you so very much. God's blessing to you and your family. And until next time, keep doing it right.
Thanks for listening. To receive Valerie's voice, free monthly leadership tips, and to learn more about her leadership programs and coaching, visit her website, valerieandcompany.com. Next week, we'll be here again to inspire, engage, and equip you with teachable points of view from successful leaders who have been doing it right. Until then, lead authentically.